I asked you guys on Instagram to tell me some of the hamster myths you've heard before, and today I'm going to be debunking those. The first myth is that hamsters love climbing. Now we have to remember that hamsters are individuals and some may enjoy climbing more than others, but we also have to keep in mind that hamsters were not designed climbers. If we take a look at how hamsters live in the wild, we will know that they are ground dwellers and that they live underneath the ground in their burrows. They were not structurally designed to be good climbers. We know this by just taking a look at them. You'll see that itty bitty stubby little tail that is, quite frankly, useless. If it was longer, like a rat or mouse's tail, then they likely would be much better climbers. The dwarf hamster, for example, even has fuzzy coated feet. This does not allow them to grip things very easily and actually can make climbing things a lot harder. Just taking a look at where hamsters originate from as well, like the Syrian hamster, who would be commonly found in the wheat fields in Syria, or the Roborowski dwarf, who would be found in the Gobi Desert. Neither of these places require them to be great climbers. So this doesn't mean we shouldn't provide our hamsters with things to climb on at all, but we need to be careful with what we are providing in case they do accidentally fall, because once again, they are not amazing climbers. But you can provide things like cork logs and grapevine wood that they can climb over easily, and if they do accidentally slip off, they're not going to hurt themselves. The next myth is that hamsters bite the bars to shorten their teeth. This is a very commonly heard myth. So when you see a hamster biting at the bars in a frenzy, they are displaying a stress and boredom behavior because they are trying to chew themselves out of their enclosure, because this is the only way they know how to get out. Now yes, hamster teeth are consistently growing, but a hamster doesn't recognize this. This isn't something that crosses their mind. They don't wake up at night and go, oh my gosh, I have to chew on these metal bars or else my teeth are going to become overgrown. That's not something that they process. The reason a hamster's teeth stay shortened is because of the day-to-day activities that they would do. For example, when they are eating hard foods like seeds, grains, and nuts, these will naturally shorten a hamster's teeth. Or when a hamster is chewing on natural materials like wood that they can gather and then bring back to build their nest, this also keeps their teeth shortened. When a hamster chews on the metal cage bars, that is not giving them anything in return. They are simply doing that behavior because they are stressed and bored. The smaller the hamster, the smaller the cage needs to be. I definitely understand where people are coming from when they think, okay, the smaller the animal, the less space they're going to need. It's like if you gave an ant a house, that's going to be a very large space for an ant compared to a human because they're just physically two different sizes. But people are only thinking about the size of the animal and how they're able to move. They're not thinking about the enrichment that needs to be fit into the enclosure to keep the animal happy. Don't forget, your enclosure is going to need to fit their wheel, multiple different types of hideouts, platforms, grapevine wood, cork logs, dig boxes with different substrates, deep bedding, other types of accessories. All of this takes up a lot of space. So in order to fit this into the enclosure, we need to have large enclosures. The next myth is that hamsters attract mice and rats to your home. Rats and mice could care less if you own a hamster in your home, and they certainly are not going to directly invade your home simply because you have a hamster. Rats and mice will, though, invade your home because they recognize that it is a warm, protected space that has an abundance of food and likely a lot of crumbs laying around. The next myth is that hamsters can live by eating vegetables instead of water. While hamsters definitely drink a lot less water than, say, rabbits or dogs, this is mainly because of where they originate from. They have to be able to survive climates that aren't always going to have access to water 24/7. But because hamsters are our pets in captivity, this means that you are required to give them fresh daily water every single day. Hamsters are herbivores. This myth is really easy to debunk, and all we have to do is just take a look at what hamsters eat in the wild. Hamsters would eat a variety of seeds, grains, nuts, plant matter, and insects. This would make hamsters omnivores. This next myth is just chef's kiss. Giving proteins turns them aggressive and carnivorous. I genuinely don't know where this myth has stemmed from or who decided that that is what happens when a hamster eats proteins. Protein is part of a hamster's diet. Just like protein is part of a dog and cat's diet, which we feed them daily, and they don't turn aggressive. Actually, I in fact can show you an animal who is a true carnivore that isn't aggressive. So as you can probably tell, I'm being absolutely mauled by this aggressive carnivore because she just eats meat. So, yeah. They suffocate themselves when they burrow. Many hamster owners may come to this conclusion because they've found their hamster passed away underneath the bedding in their nest, when your hamster likely just passed away from an illness while they were sleeping, which would be underneath the bedding because that's how they live. Like we talked about earlier, hamsters are ground dwellers. If burrowing caused suffocation, the entire species would be extinct. We also gotta look at the fact that bedding isn't airtight. When you go to scatter feed your hamster, notice how those tiny little millet seeds fall all the way to the bottom of the enclosure? That's because there are little pockets that make it capable for something to go through. That means it's not airtight. Now, if you didn't have any ventilation in your enclosure and it was a sealed off hamster cage, then yes, suffocation is very much possible because there's no air circulation. The next myth is that all hamsters smell bad. In reality, all animals, including humans, are gonna have some sort of odor. That odor is going to vary person to person or animal to animal. All hamsters are going to be different. The 3 current hamsters I own really don't smell at all, but I have had a hamster in the past who was absolutely stinky. So it completely just comes down to each and every hamster. Hamsters can change sex. This is just physically not possible. Hamsters are not an animal capable of doing this. There are other animals who actually are capable of changing their sex, but hamsters are not one of them. What usually happens is somebody goes into the pet store and they want a pair of hamsters. They think they're getting 2 females or 2 males, but the pet store unfortunately missexed them and they end up with a male and female unknowingly. And then one hamster has babies, which then instead of blaming the pet store, they assume that their hamster magically switched sex, that they are meant for children and not adults. I hate this myth so much, and it sucks because hamsters are often looked down upon as a pet for an adult to own because they're childish, when there's nothing about a hamster that makes them childish. The only childish things are when companies create these princess and race car enclosures that are completely inappropriate for a hamster to even live in. And in all honesty, they're not great pets for children. They are much better suited for adults. Hamsters can see in the dark. I definitely get where people are coming from with this one because hamsters are nocturnal/crepuscular animals, so one would assume that because they're awake during dark hours, they're going to be able to see better in the dark. Hamsters actually have terrible eyesight in general. They are nearsighted. They see about 6 inches in front of their face, the rest of the world completely blurry to them. This is why your hamster relies on its other senses like its whiskers, sense of hearing, and sense of smell. Though hamsters do have more rods in their eyes than humans, they are a lot more light sensitive. So they can definitely see better in dim lighting than they can in bright daylight. Hamsters with red eyes are evil. The color red has a really bad rap, and we associate it with negative things and evil, demonic things, but hamsters with red eyes simply are just hamsters that lack pigment. Basically, the eyes are transparent and the redness you're seeing is the blood vessels in the eyes. Hamsters can vomit. Hamsters cannot physically vomit. Their bodies are just not built to do so. And usually what most owners are confusing as vomit is actually a hamster unpouching their cheek pouches, which is separate from their digestive system. These are their cheeks that have little pockets in them that keep food safe and dry so that they're able to bring a lot of it back to their nest. It's actually been found that most rodents like squirrels, mice, rats, gophers, and beavers cannot physically throw up. They've done studies on this, and researchers have concluded that their brains just don't have the neurological circuits to allow them to throw up. When a hamster bites you, you get rabies. I've had a lot of worried commenters before about their hamster biting them and if they're going to get rabies because of it. The simple answer is no. In order for your hamster to get rabies, they would have had to come in direct contact with another animal that is carrying the viral disease. And usually they would have to be bitten, which if your hamster gets bit by another animal, they likely are not going to survive. The CDC also does mention that small rodents like squirrels, hamsters, guinea pigs, gerbils, chipmunks, rats, and mice are almost never found to be infected with rabies and have not been known to transmit rabies to humans. The next myth is that hamsters are vicious and violent creatures. Unfortunately, hamsters get such a bad rap for being a vicious and aggressive pet to own. Hamsters are prey animals. The only defense mechanism they literally have to protect themselves is pretty much biting or screaming. Sometimes helps defend themselves, usually not. Hamsters haven't been domesticated nearly as long as dogs and cats have been. A majority of hamsters also come from terribly unethical rodent mills. When you are born into abuse and neglect, do you expect an animal to be friendly and kind and want to love on you? No. So when people say hamsters are vicious and aggressive, they just don't understand the animal. And the last myth is that hamsters are breeds, when in fact hamsters are actually species. When we think of the pets that we own in captivity, like dogs, cats, rabbits, guinea pigs, all of these pets have different breed groups. So one would assume that hamsters are just different breeds as well, right? Breed groups are created by humans by selectively breeding certain traits. So when we take a look at a pug and we take a look at a Labrador, these are just two different breeds of dogs that have been selectively bred to be the way they look. Different hamster species were not created by humans, they were created by nature. This is also why it's not possible for hamsters to interbreed with each other, because they're not different breeds, they are different species. Though there have been many people who are convinced that they are able to create these hybrid animals like dwarf Syrians or a Chinese robo, when in fact this is not possible at all. The only exception to this is the winter white dwarf and the Campbell's dwarf, who are capable of interbreeding with each other, creating the hybrid dwarf hamster. And this is because they are so closely related, as well as they do have a similar amount of chromosomes. If you are interested in learning more about hybrid dwarfs, I talk a lot more about them in my History of Hamsters video. Those are all of the myths I'm going to be debunking today. Let me know in the comments what other hamster myths you've heard before. So I will see you guys in my next video. Bye! Hey bud. Bud, we can't do this. No, we can't do this. Oh.